This is an introduction to the U.S. National Grid. My name is Randy Knippel. I am the GIS Manager at Dakota County, and this is the U.S. National Grid Implementation Working Group. So I'm going to go through some slides. I've given this kind of a presentation through multiple audiences multiple times, and I've pared this down to what I think is really just the essential information. Really coming from, where am I? Coming from the GIS world, there's certainly a lot of technical capabilities that we have for mapping, visualization, 3D modeling, things like that. And people in emergency management and emergency response are starting to understand that as well. And really, if we think about the cycle of emergency management, GIS can be applied in each of these different phases. So the response phase is right after an event. The recovery phase is getting things back to normal. Mitigation is putting us in a better position for the next time it happens. And preparation is everything that we do so that when the event happens, we're well positioned to respond better. And so GIS can help with search and rescue and damage assessment in the response phase. In the recovery phase, we can help track status and help with resource deployment. Mitigation phase, that's when we have more time on our hands. So now we can get into really the 3D analysis, database analysis, and modeling to help understand how we can better be positioned for the next time that happens, and then assisting with planning in the preparation phase. But what we really need to think about is right here, when an actual event occurs, before that triggers a response. In the GIS world, we need to think about what can we do with the least amount of resources, most reliably, with the lowest costs, with the minimum dependencies, so that we can at least do something. In a worst case scenario, we have no power, we have no computers, we have no access to our GIS databases, and we really don't have time. And so that's when we need to really think about maps. And in some ways, my counterparts in the GIS world have kind of forgotten about this, that, while we know that once we print a map, it's out of date. And we don't really want to make a lot of paper maps, but we should have a strategic number of copies of maps available in an emergency situation. So this then becomes the foundation for what we do with GIS. As the lights come back on, as we get access, we can start to do more. But in a worst case scenario, in the middle of the night, you don't even need a GIS person if the emergency managers and first responders have maps available to them and know how to use them. So at a fundamental level, what this is really all about is teaching basic map reading and land navigation skills to first responders, emergency managers, and so on, so that they can begin to use GIS technology at a very basic level, and be able to track things that are happening. And then once the GIS professionals show up, we're able to scrub that information off of those maps. So the maps become a precision instrument. So we can teach people how to use these maps very easily. We simply tell them to pay attention to the grids, the grid lines that are on the maps, and the labels that are in the margin, and teach them to read right, then up. So simply reading right to 7.5, up to 5.6 describes or it indicates the lower left corner of a square. And by adding more digits, we can get more precision. So we can start to estimate locations within that square by adding another digit. So if we look at some examples of that, again, looking at the grid, if we have a location 706,575, we read right to 70, estimate over 6. We just estimate 10 divisions or 60%, however you want to think about that. And then read up to 5.7, and then we estimate to 5 or 50%, and we can put a pin in that. 734,527, read right to 7.3, estimate to 4, read up to 5.2, estimate to 7, put a pin in it. 723,504, right to 7.2, estimate to 3, up to 5.0, estimate to 4. 732,596, read right to 73, estimate to 2, read up to 59, estimate to 6. 742,561, same thing, 74, estimate to 2, read up to 56, estimate to 1. And this is very simple. You know, we can really talk about doing just-in-time training in how to use these maps. These are the kinds of grid references that describe a location in a uniform way for anybody that is relaying locations over a radio to assets in the field or vice versa. Well, this is all actually a part of a national system. We can see that it covers the entire US. This is an index that shows the different pieces of this grid and how it all ties together. So this is really seamless across the entire US. And that's called the US National Grid. US National Grid has been a national standard since 2001. It's been adopted by several federal agencies, including the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Department of Homeland Security, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and the United States Geological Survey. The significance of that is that the first two, FEMA and DHS, are the emergency management side of the federal government. NGA and USGS are the mapping side of the federal government. It's also been adopted by several states. I list them there. It was also adopted by the state of Minnesota in 2009. It is, in fact, the military grid referencing system. This is nothing new. Military grid referencing system has been around since World War II. It's been proven in the military, continues to be used by all NATO forces, and it's also used by the National Guard, which means when we have a really bad event that requires the National Guard assistance, we will be using the same system that they use. And so we have a common language of location that's understood by everybody, and it's universal across the entire US. In fact, it covers the entire Earth. And in reality, it's all based on UTM coordinates. So those of you that know GIS, UTM is nothing new. The MGRS and US National Grid are nothing new. They are simply a convenient system for abbreviating UTM coordinates, which cover the entire planet. Well, let's take a deeper dive into what the US National Grid coordinate format looks like. So a full National Grid designation is shown there, 15T, Victor Kilo 89134 64387. Now, that's 15 characters. It may seem rather complex, but we can break it down very quickly. And in fact, we can show directly how it relates to UTM coordinates. And so you can see the 15 is the same. So if we have 15T, UTM zone 15 north. And then you can see the coordinates. And you can see that the last 5 digits in X and Y are the same 5 digits that you see in the US National Grid. So the first 3 characters are the grid zone or grid zone designation. The next 2 characters is the 100,000 meter square of UTM. So it's basically eliminating the 400,000 and the 4,900,000 from UTM, which leaves us with an even number of digits in X and Y, everything from the 10,000s place down in both X and Y. So we're starting to simplify it. And then what we have left is the easting and a northing, or right and up, or X and Y, however you want to think about it. And the numeric portion is always meters between 0 and 99,999. So again, if we look at that national map, if we zoom in on that, you can see the grid zone designation, 14T, 15T, 14S, 15S. These are actually 6 degree by 8 degree polygons or areas in latitude, longitude. And then within that, we can see a rectangular grid overlaid with alphabetic characters. And it's actually, you can look, if you look at within the 15 here, you can see you have a column of V, a column of W, a column of X, and then you have rows, T, U, V, and then starting over, A, B, C, D, E, and so on. And what you can notice is from zone to zone, those characters are not duplicated. And what that means is that a given 100,000 meters square designation like WB will not be repeated for approximately 800 miles in any direction. So it really eliminates the chance of creating any confusion when you're going across these grid zones. Okay, well, let's look at some of the efficiencies again. So there's 15 characters, and that seems really, really complex maybe to some people, but we can start to get some efficiencies very quickly because we can choose the number of characters just as we did on the previous slide. So if I use only four digits in X and Y, I'm actually specifying a precision of 10 meters. The full designation is a precision of 1 meter. If I only use 3 digits in X and Y, I'm now specifying a 100 meter square. And 2 digits in X and Y is a 1,000 meter square. So I can choose the resolution that's necessary to describe the location that I'm interested in. If I'm describing the location for a football field, it's probably good enough to do it to 100 meters, maybe even 1,000 meters. Because maybe there are going to be flashing lights in the middle of it, and that's going to be our landing zone or something like that. So I can choose the number of digits that are necessary in any particular situation. And in most cases for emergency response, four digits in X and Y to do a precision of 10 meters is going to be enough. Then we can go further. Once we are working in a local area, you see that 15T was a very large area, 6 degrees by 8 degrees. We don't need to keep saying that over and over and over again. It'd be redundant. Similarly, 100,000 meters is also quite large. And once we're working within a 100,000 meter square, we don't have to keep saying that either. So we can just eliminate that for radio communications and day-to-day operations. So now we can do local truncation. So we can simply use the X and Y coordinates, and 4 digits are going to be a precision of 10 meters, 6 are going to be a precision of 100 meters, 4 will be a precision of 1,000 meters. And we can just use that when we're working in a localized area. And again, choosing the precision that's appropriate. We also always know by convention that there are an even number of digits in X and Y. Even if there is no space, we know we can just split it down the middle, and the first half is X and the last half is Y. So again, it helps eliminate any confusion. Plus, we know that if we don't get an even number of digits, something is missing, and eliminates error in that way. What about alternatives? Well, we can use UTM coordinates, but we do have to specify all those pieces. We have to say zone 15 north, 489,134, 4,964,387. And we always have to do it to a full level of precision. We just can't start dropping digits anywhere in there. There's no provision with UTM coordinates to assume a precision or describing different levels of precision or different squares of the grid system. So we always have to do the whole coordinate in X and Y, and it really doesn't give us any indication of the level of precision that we're providing. What about local coordinate systems? Every state has a state plane coordinate system. State of Minnesota actually has 3 state plane coordinate systems: a north, a middle, and a south. Also, there are local coordinate systems. In Minnesota, we have county coordinates, and there are good reasons for using that when we're mapping parcels and we want to make sure we're able to measure accurately for property lines, and that the coordinates that we have are going to translate very accurately to GPS. But nobody else knows how to use Dakota County coordinate systems. Or if we're engaged in mutual aid across state lines, we need to make sure we're using the correct state plane coordinate system. What about latitude, longitude? Well, we can express latitude, longitude in several different formats. We can do it as degrees, minutes, and seconds, and that's full 24 characters. And we have to use, or we have to read every single character in that to make sure there's no confusion. So it'll be read as 44 degrees, 49 minutes, 58.1 seconds north, 93 degrees, 08 minutes, 15.0 seconds west. That's a lot to say. And again, there's no provision for precision or anything like that. We can also express it as degrees, minutes, decimal minutes. And here the big question is, well, how many decimal points do I need to use when I'm specifying decimal minutes? And similarly, we can do degrees and decimal degrees. But again, how many digits do I need to use to specify the precision appropriately? And with degrees, minutes, seconds, if I don't say that right, if I miss something in there, you could end up sending somebody 50 miles away from the location that you intend them to go to. And there are examples out there of such things actually happening. Well, why do we need this? Well, ultimately, it's for situations like this. We have a disaster where we can't recognize any visual cues in the field. We can't see addresses. We can't see street signs. We can't even see where the streets were. We can't tell where one building stopped or started. And it's just one continuous mess. So as well as knowing that we may have resources coming from outside of our jurisdiction for mutual aid. And what do they know about this situation? It may be something that's completely foreign to them, let alone the fact that it's such a mess. Now you get involved in a search and rescue operation in this, how do you track your progress? Well, once we use GPS and the national grid, it starts to give us this kind of a framework overlaid on top of this mess. And then we couple that with maps that show how things were before the event occurred, and includes things like key resources, critical infrastructure, a vulnerable population. Now we're able to use GPS on a smartphone or GPS device, be able to measure coordinates off of the maps, and then navigate to those locations in this debris field to perhaps find where was the daycare, where was the pharmacy, as well as we search an area, we can start to check off different locations on these maps so we can clear everything by 100-meter grid as we work through this area. Well, there are also mobile apps that support this too, and you can take your pick. Go through your app store, look for GPS mobile apps, but look for, once you install the app, look for the settings for the coordinate display. And you will have a number of different options. And you should be able to find USNG. If you can't find USNG, look for MGRS. They are essentially synonymous. There are some subtle differences, but for the most part, all intents and purposes, MGRS and USNG are synonymous. So you look for that, and you're able to then use displays. Some of them incorporate aerial photography. Some of them use different display formats and things like that. So what this is really all about, given all the different possible techniques and coordinate systems for mapping locations and communicating locations, we had to pick one. And the best choice was the military grid referencing system. And so the military grid referencing system has been adopted as the U.S. national grid. And if we make that decision before the disaster happens, that means that we already know when we are engaged in the response, what language of location we're all using. So we don't need to make that decision or not have made that decision in the middle of a disaster.